why you held on to those documents when you knew the federal government was seeking them and then had given you a subpoena to return them.
Are you ready? Are you ready? Can I talk?
Yeah, what's the
mind?
answer?
Do you mind?
I would like for you to answer the question.
Okay, it's very simple to answer.
That's why I asked it.
It's very simple to, you are a nasty person, I'll tell you.
Can you answer why you held on to the documents?
I was negotiating and we were talking.
Kaitlan Collins just served Donald Trump the juiciest slice of humble pie on live TV, and his reaction was absolutely priceless. Picture Trump, red-faced and scrambling for words as Collins casually hits him with a truth bomb he never saw coming. Trust me, folks, you've never seen Trump this rattled.
I don't think that's it.
So he doesn't think he can fire the Fed chair?
I think that's been resolved in the previous administration. You can go back and find a clip where I talked about it right in this week.
Kaitlan Collins isn't holding back on Donald Trump, who is making headlines for all the wrong reasons this time. He's gone and fired 2 Democratic Federal Trade Commission, FTC, commissioners like it's some sort of reality TV stunt, one where someone gets dramatically tossed off the show with no warning or explanation, just because the star thinks they're above it all. But let's be clear, Trump, this isn't a TV show, and this isn't how things work in the real world. You can't just fire people because you don't like their political views or because you feel like
President Trump's top economic advisors, Kevin Hassett, as soon as he wrapped an interview. This was coming about 24 hours after President Trump had summarily fired both of the Democratic commissioners who serve on the Federal Trade Commission, which they argued was an illegal move by the president. And it also raised questions, certainly in the business world, about whether or not that could mean that Trump is preparing to seek to fire other independent agency heads, like potentially the Fed chair, Fed board members. A question that I posed to Mr. Kevin Hassett. The president fired last night 2 members of the FTC, the Democratic members of that. It raised questions about whether or not he does respect the independence of the Fed or he thinks that they are fair game as well. What is the president's view on that?
One of President Trump's top economic advisors, Kevin Hassett, spoke out shortly after an interview, which came about 24 hours after President Trump had fired both Democratic commissioners serving on the Federal Trade Commission, FTC. The move was met with claims that it was illegal, raising questions within the business world about whether Trump was preparing to fire other independent agency heads, including possibly the Federal Reserve Chair and board members. I posed the question to Kevin Hassett. The president fired 2 Democratic members of the FTC last night, raising concerns about whether he respects the independence of the Federal Reserve or if he believes they're fair game as well. What is the president's stance on that? Whether it's a blatant disregard for legal norms or his usual pattern of trying to skirt accountability, it's clear that Trump doesn't care about the rules. He's always been the type to think that the system applies to everyone else but him. However, this time, the law has his number, and it might just be time for him to face the consequences. If you're enjoying this content, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, The Celeb Report.
Get this to the Supreme Court to try to overturn the 1935 precedent. The goal was to let these individuals go. If we have to fight it all the way to the Supreme Court, we certainly will.
Kaitlan Collins isn't tolerating any power plays. You can't just fire people for doing their jobs, especially when it comes to government commissioners tasked with holding businesses accountable. These commissioners were ensuring companies didn't run wild, something Trump absolutely can't stand. Yet, like a petulant child, Trump fires them for doing their jobs too well. But hey, when you're someone who thinks the law doesn't apply to you, I guess this is just another Tuesday.
The fired commissioners, Commissioner Bedoya, told the New York Times, and I'm quoting now, when people hear this news, they need to not think about me. They need to think about the billionaires behind the president at his inauguration. My next source was appointed to the FTC by President Trump actually during his first term in 2018. She was the other Democratic commissioner fired by him yesterday, Rebecca Slaughter.
Kaitlan Collins, as always, doesn't let Trump get away with it. This isn't a whoops, I made a mistake moment. This is classic Trump behavior. He fires anyone who stands in his way, especially when it comes to people doing their job of enforcing accountability. These FTC commissioners were making sure businesses were held to a fair standard, and we all know how Trump feels about that. He doesn't want to be checked. He wants free rein to do whatever he pleases. But guess what, Don? The law doesn't bend to your whims. It's illegal to just fire people because you don't like them, no matter how much you think you're above it all. Here's the thing, Kaitlan's not pulling any punches. This isn't the first time Trump has pulled something like this. It's become a pattern. He doesn't like what someone's doing? Fire them. Whether it's staff, employees, or now government officials, Trump's idea of leadership is to simply toss anyone who disagrees with him out the door. And when confronted with his reckless actions, what does he do? Deflect, deflect, deflect. But don't worry, Kaitlan's got his number.
The statute that governs the FTC says that someone who is in your position cannot be fired only if they can be removed for cause if there is neglect, malfeasance, or inefficiency. Were you given any of those reasons when you were fired?
No, absolutely none.
And so what was there just any argument whatsoever beyond the letter you received?
The president can fire you, and so he chooses to.
Trump may think he's playing a high-stakes game of chess, but it's clear he's just throwing a tantrum. Accountability? Nah, who needs that when you can just fire people who actually hold you to standards? For Kaitlan Collins, this isn't just a minor blip. It's another example of Trump's utter disregard for the law, fair competition, and anyone who dares to challenge his vision. He fires people like it's a joke, but Kaitlan's not laughing. She's calling out the hypocrisy, recklessness, and blatant power grab that's been Trump's trademark from day one. The worst part of this entire stunt is Trump's reaction. He's not owning up to his actions. No, he's blaming everyone else. The commissioners were incompetent. The system's unfair to him. In Trump's world, it's always someone else's fault. Well, guess what? Kaitlan Collins isn't letting him deflect this one.
I believe that's illegal.
It is absolutely illegal. The statute that you referenced is very clear on its face. And in fact, the Supreme Court has evaluated whether it is a constitutionally valid statute and whether a president can remove an FTC commissioner. Exactly this question. They faced it 90 years ago when FDR tried to remove an FTC commissioner, Commissioner Humphrey. And they said, no, the law is clear. They cannot be removed other than for cause, and that is a constitutional.
These commissioners were simply doing their jobs, and for that, Trump thought it was acceptable to fire them. But as Kaitlan points out, Trump doesn't want to be held accountable for anything. He just wants to do whatever he wants, whenever he wants, with no consequences. This is where Kaitlan draws the line. You can't keep getting away with this, Dawn. Trump's entire life has been a series of scandals, and he still walks around as if the rules don't apply to him. Kaitlan is here to remind us all that this isn't a minor issue. It's a blatant abuse of power that needs to be called out for what it is.
Something interesting in your statement when you were fired, and you said that you believed in part it was because, quote, I have a voice and he is afraid of what I'll tell the American people. What is it that you have to tell the American people?
Yeah, well, it's a really important point. I'm a minority commissioner right now. That means I'm not in charge of the agency. But what the FTC minority commissioners can do, and what commissioners at other independent agencies can do, is bring transparency and accountability to the work of the agency. So without the voice of the minority commissioners, if you see, for example, the FTC dismiss one of our many litigations against some of the big tech CEOs who flanked the president in his inauguration, you may not have any reason to know what was going on behind the scenes or what some other explanations or counter arguments will be. And that transparency and accountability has served the FTC really well for over 100.
Trump has no business firing people who are doing their jobs, and he certainly doesn't get to treat this like some game he can win by bending the rules to his will. At the end of the day, Trump isn't just undermining the system, he's breaking it. It's high time someone like Kaitlan holds him accountable, because if we don't, this will just keep happening. Trump will continue to believe the laws don't apply to him and that he can fire anyone who challenges him. But we know better, and Kaitlan isn't backing down from calling him out.
We have that picture of all of the CEOs who were flanking Trump at his inauguration, but the FTC is in active litigation with some of, maybe all of, a lot of these people.
Almost all of them.
You're looking at the names. And
I'm looking at the names right now. Almost all of them.
And so you're saying that in your position, you'd be able to speak out and say, okay, hey, they just dismissed this case against this company. Here's why I think that's a problem, or I disagree.
Yeah, so for example, in 2019, when I was a minority commissioner at the FTC settled a big privacy case with the company that was then called Facebook for a $5 billion payment. the majority of the time touted it as the largest payment ever and a huge successful win for law enforcement. But I said I disagreed, that I thought it wasn't nearly what the violations merited, and people should understand it as a slap on the wrist for a company that had the kinds of profits and revenue that Facebook had.
While the two fired Democratic FTC commissioners are preparing to battle Donald Trump in the Supreme Court, Kaitlan Collins will never stop using her voice to roast him. Why does this matter in the grand scheme of things? Because Trump has a history of using his power to boot people out, and now two members of a key regulatory body are fighting back to ensure they don't get walked all over like so many others. While those FTC commissioners are gearing up for a legal showdown, another individual, Kaitlan Collins, is taking a different approach. She's not planning a courtroom battle. Instead, she's doing what she does best, taking the fight to Trump live on television with her sharp tongue and fearless questioning. And boy, does she love to roast the man.
There were two big things that stood out in the press conference that President Trump just held with the British Prime Minister Keir Starmer here at the White House. One was how he talked about President Zelensky and how differently his tone that he took was compared to what he has used in recent days, when he called the Ukrainian leader a dictator without elections.
A dictator without elections. Zelensky better move fast or he's not going to have a country left. Gotta move fast.
Do you still think that Mr. Zelensky is a dictator?
Did I say that? I can't believe I said that. Next question.
Trump would not repeat that claim today, but he also did not apologize for it when he was asked if he'd do so when he comes to...
You've probably seen Kaitlan Collins on CNN, where she's become one of the most recognizable faces in the network's White House coverage. She's not just another reporter asking softball questions to get a quick soundbite. No, Kaitlan Collins has built a reputation for herself by challenging Trump and his administration head-on, and she does it with style, grace, and a whole lot of sass. If there's one thing you can count on, it's that Kaitlan Collins will never stop using her voice to roast Donald Trump. What makes Collins' approach to Trump so unique is how she handles it. While the fired FTC commissioners navigate a complicated legal battle, Collins is on the front lines of political journalism, holding Trump accountable whenever she gets the chance. She doesn't hesitate to confront him with hard-hitting questions, even when his team tries to shut her down. When she asks the tough questions, there's no avoiding them, no turning the other cheek.
We had a great call, and it lasted for a long time, over an hour this morning.
It's the first time we're hearing directly from Trump on this call that he had with President Putin today, the first confirmed call that we know of between the U.S. president and the Russian president since Trump took office a few weeks ago.
President Putin said that he wants it to end. He doesn't want to end it and then go back to fighting 6 months later. We talked about the possibility, I mentioned it, of a ceasefire so we can stop the killing, and I think we'll probably end up at some point getting a ceasefire in the not too distant future.
Now, of course, the timeline here is a real question, Jake. President Trump pledged on the campaign trail to solve the Ukraine war in one day. And now the question is what this is going to look like and how negotiation is going to go.
Take, for example, her role during White House press briefings. Kaitlan Collins is constantly asking Trump about everything from his controversial statements to policies that affect millions of Americans. But it's not just about asking tough questions. Collins knows how to press his buttons and keep Trump on the defensive. The way she challenges him in real time is a spectacle we can't get enough of. Trump, who's used to avoiding accountability, now faces the sharp-tongued questions of a woman who doesn't care about political niceties or being liked. Let's be real, Trump's not exactly known for handling criticism well, especially when it comes from someone who isn't afraid to challenge him. Unlike the FTC commissioners, who have to slog through legal channels and rely on the courts to determine their fate, Collins has the power of live television and the ability to capture Trump's unfiltered responses in real time. It's a dynamic that plays out daily, and it's both comical and disturbing. You get the sense that the only way Trump can cope with Collins' sharp critiques is to resort to his usual tactics: deflection, insults, and, of course, the occasional Twitter rant.
Generals are in the east of Ukraine, not far from the front lines, and in areas that Russia has occupied. Will you direct President Putin to withdraw his forces from those areas if there's U.S. interest there?
We'll take a look at the time. We have a lot of area It's a very big area we're talking about, so we'll take a look. I'll study that and I'll see.
And who would protect those minerals if they are U.S. interests? Would that be Ukrainian forces, European
The agreement
forces,
will protect it.
U.S.
The
forces?
agreement, yeah, we're signing an agreement.
Right, but what if Russia tries to invade or there's Russian aggression in those spots?
I just told you I don't think that's going to happen. And if that were going to happen, I wouldn't make a deal. If I thought that was going to happen, I wouldn't make a deal.
Some people may wonder
Yeah,
why.
they ought to focus on CNN and survival. Yes, I mean, there's
Why are
very
you,
close
why are you confident that Putin will violate
focus
the
on
deal?
surviving because CNN's got such low ratings. I don't think they're going to survive.
People will
Let's
actually have
go.
confidence Putin will violate the deal.
While the fired FTC commissioners are preparing for a long and drawn-out legal battle, Kaitlan Collins continues to shine a light on the dysfunction of the Trump administration. She's done what many thought was impossible. She's used the press room as a battleground for political warfare, with her wielding a microphone as her sword. It's not just about providing information, it's about holding powerful people accountable. Collins does it with the kind of flair that makes you wonder if the real action is happening on cable news, not in the courtroom. Of course, we can't forget how Trump has responded to her grilling. Like most people caught off guard by tough questions, Trump often resorts to mocking and belittling Collins. It's his go-to move, try to discredit the messenger rather than confront the message. But that's never worked on Collins. If anything, it's only fueled her desire to push harder and expose more. In a way, the more Trump tries to tear her down, the more he builds her up. It's a beautiful cycle of political payback that plays out every time Collins faces him in the briefing room, but while Kaitlan Collins is serving up some of the best political commentary on TV, we can't forget the larger implications of the FTC commissioner's legal battle. Their fight could have far-reaching consequences for the future of regulatory power and executive authority. Depending on how the Supreme Court rules, these commissioners, fired under dubious circumstances, aren't just fighting for their jobs. They're fighting for the integrity of institutions that have the power to regulate everything from the tech industry to consumer protections. They've gone to war with Trump's administration, and they're not backing down.
The most astonishing moments that we have ever seen happen inside the Oval Office between these world leaders essentially shouting at one another by the end of this, devolving into, at points, Trump and Vance berating Zelensky for saying that he was not being grateful enough for the aid that the United States has provided to Ukraine, and Zelensky arguing back that they do not understand Putin, essentially, that he will violate any agreement if the proper guarantees aren't in place. That seemed to particularly incense Trump as he was saying, don't tell us what we're going to feel. Zelensky has been arguing that Putin will not stop with Ukraine, that he will go on to other Eastern European nations, including Poland, as he made the argument there. And Trump was essentially pushing back on that and telling Zelensky that he had no cards and that he needed to make a deal. And at one point, I think the most striking line from that could foreshadow what the rest of these talks are going to look like, what this press conference could look like if we still see these world leaders come out where they were supposed to sign that deal, is the president said to Zelensky, you either make a deal or we are out.
But let's face it, no matter what happens with the fired FTC commissioners, we all know who's winning the war of words between Trump and Kaitlan Collins. In the end, while the commissioners prepare for their day in court, Kaitlan Collins will continue to use her voice as a weapon, ready to roast Donald Trump at every opportunity. If there's one thing that's clear, it's that Collins isn't afraid to speak truth to power, even if that power is sitting in the White House. It's a battle of wits, and Donald Trump is never quite ready for what she has to say. The firestorm she creates every time she challenges him proves that, while Trump may have the legal system on his side, Collins has something far more important: the power of the press and the truth.